Mentor characters are everywhere. If I say Obi-Wan, Iroh, Haymitch, All Might, Yoda, Rafiki, Kefri, you already know the kind of character I'm talking about without having to explain a thing. And if I missed your favorite, make sure to drop it in the comments. And what's crazy is we have been telling this story for a very long time. Maybe you didn't know this, but the word mentor goes all the way back to the Odyssey, where mentor is an actual character Odysseus leaves with his son Telemachus. So it seems pretty topical with the Odyssey out in theaters, but it also means we have had a lot of time to learn the pattern. The wise old mentor, the reluctant one, the washed up one, the mentor who turns out to be evil, and like many of them, the ones who die. I mean, at this point, we know the trope, we know the anti-trope, we know the anti-anti-trope. So the question is, can you even write an original mentor anymore? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. We're going to explore the 4 trope traps of mentor characters and look at some of the best examples of it throughout fiction. And by the end, I think you're actually going to be able to write one that's original and unique to your story. Well, all right, plot heads, let's get into it. Now, for any of you new here, I'm Brian. I spent over a decade in Hollywood in creative development, and I've helped to develop over 1,000 scripts and manuscripts with writers looking to improve their stories. And as a fun fact, while we're on the topic, I once had this incredible mentor, my AP English teacher, who pulled me aside one day and told me I was using way too many words and not saying much at all. For several months, he met with me after class and helped me hone my writing. I can't even begin to express how much better he made me as a writer, and honestly, how much he changed the trajectory of my life. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And I think that gets at why mentors can matter so much, both in real life and in fiction. And actually, I want to stay there for a second because I'm about to spend a whole video talking about the traps we can fall into with this trope. And I don't want to rush past why we keep writing them in the first place. Because think about what we're asking a protagonist to do in a lot of stories. Somewhere between the beginning and the end, this character has to become capable of something they aren't capable of yet. And writing that change is harder than it sounds because a lot of learning happens internally. In a way, we need to trigger character development, which is exactly what a mentor character can do. And that's a powerful relationship to put in a story. The problem is that once we know the pattern this well, some pretty important writing decisions could start feeling like they've already been decided for us. Why would these two people ever end up together? Well, one needs a mentor. What is this mentor even for? Well, to help the hero. What happens between them? Well, the mentor teaches and the student learns. And once the student doesn't need them anymore, well, you know. Those are trope traps. And this is where I think this gets fun because I don't want to spend the rest of the video telling you to stay away from that. I want to walk straight into it and see what happens when we actually make those choices for ourselves. So let's start and spring that first trap. Now, mentors are kind of suspiciously convenient when you think about it, right? It's almost like they materialize out of thin air right when the protagonist needs them. Our prayers have been answered. One mentor coming right up. And I've unfortunately seen this over and over again with writers I've worked with. And I get it. I mean, the hero isn't ready. So of course we start looking for somebody who can help them get over that finish line. But if that's the only reason these two end up together, we basically built the relationship out of narrative necessity, and the audience will notice. So that poses a real problem for us. So what we actually need is to dramatize the path into the relationship. In Hercules, the VHS I rewound and rewatched more than any movie growing up, is almost comically direct about it. Herc needs to become a true hero, and his dad Zeus tells him exactly who to find. That alone would be the most boring, convenient setup possible. Except Phil doesn't want to train him.
My answer is 2 words.
That's immediate resistance. We have a story now. And now that path we thought was going to be so simple suddenly has something going on inside it. Phil has already done this. He's trained heroes before, he's watched them fail, and he's retired from the whole thing. So Hercules showing up with exactly the need Phil can solve doesn't magically make Phil available to solve it. Then Hercules starts getting good. Suddenly the exact thing Phil is helping him to accomplish is also making Hercules more visible to Hades and pulling him deeper into danger that was already waiting for him. And so as that danger grows, so do the old ghosts of Phil's past worry that this might go wrong. I mean, look at that. You can see that the mentorship itself has a resistance, it has a coinciding story, and it has rising stakes, which are all key pieces to making the trope actually work for your story. And I want to use a second example here to really drive this point home, because Spider-Verse takes that coinciding story even further. I mean, Miles and Peter B barely get to have this mentorship that's separate from the actual problem going on. Miles has no clue what he's doing, and then another Spider-Man literally falls into his universe. Once again, our prayers have been answered. Except Peter needs the collider to get home. So now the thing moving the actual story forward is also the thing forcing these two to keep dealing with each other. which means every time we get more Miles and Peter together, they are learning how to work together because they are trying to accomplish the same thing. And that gives the mentorship real stakes almost immediately. Peter is glitching in this universe, so there is a ticking clock on how long he can even be there. Miles needs to become capable because eventually Peter physically cannot be the answer for him. So the story is doing this all at once. It's putting them together, giving them reasons to stay together, and making it increasingly important that Miles actually learns something while they are together. So how to apply this for your story? Well, take this back to your own pages and do me a favor and temporarily forget that you already decided one of these is a mentor. I'm going to give you a string of questions I want you to ask for your story. What puts these two characters on this path in the first place? What makes the path complicated once they're on it? What starts changing in the rest of the story as the student gets better? Because the world around them is still moving. The protagonist's progress should start opening some doors and also creating new problems. And all of that gives the mentorship something to react to besides, okay, what are we learning today? And that's really how I think you spring this trap. But we aren't in the clear yet. A major pillar of this channel has always been making characters feel alive, looking at the story from multiple points of view, building relationships that actually move in the story. And the mentor trope has a pretty fundamental problem when you do that. We always look at this relationship from the student's perspective. But for the mentor, what the hell are they getting out of this? What about their story? So I feel sort of bad for some of the mentor characters out there. They really get the short end of the stick because the story is focused so much on the protagonist and what they need. The mentor becomes this sort of wisdom vending machine. I mean, how altruistic of them. And I think this is really one of the biggest trope traps. We write the mentor for the hero, and we don't even bother to figure out the mentor as an individual character. I mean, why would they even do this? What were they doing before the protagonist even showed up? Because they have this life experience already, we figure they have no more character development left to do. And I think we can do so much better than that. We actually already brushed up against this with Phil in the last trap. His history with all those failed heroes is what makes him qualified to train Hercules, but it also is still affecting him now. So Hercules becomes a key part of Phil's story. And with Sunrise on the Reaping coming out in a few months, I want us to think about Haymitch from the Hunger Games. I mean, Haymitch is the only living victor from District 12, so he is automatically assigned to be the mentor of Katniss and Peeta. He has the knowledge and the network to help these two survive, but he is so much more than that function alone. He has his own history and unresolved trauma that follows him everywhere. So Katniss and Peeta, even with their own character arcs, play an important role in Haymitch's.
This mentoring is very taxing stuff.
Now, this is the core part of breaking the trope trap. She pushes back against the teacher himself, and the relationship isn't a one-way street anymore. And I think the movie Creed takes that idea even further, because Adonis eventually gets involved in something that has absolutely nothing to do with why Rocky agreed to help him in the first place. Adonis wants to become a fighter just like his dad, and Rocky is the person he believes can get him there. It's pretty simple, but Rocky has a story going on completely separate from that. He gets cancer, and after everything he went through, losing Adrian and then Polly, he decides he doesn't want treatment.
Everything I got is moved on.
Which is comically perfect for this trap, because Rocky is basically saying, I came into your life to help you. That doesn't mean you get to come into mine. But to break the trope, Adonis becomes a force of change in Rocky's life.
So if I fight, you fight.
So that's something I really want you to take with this. A mentorship is just as much an emotional contract between characters. Both can have room to grow and develop in surprising ways. I mean, it basically lifts up the function of the trope and makes each character feel real. So when you take this back to your own story, start by making sure you built the mentor just as thoroughly as you built the protagonist. If you haven't seen my character chain video, I'll link it below, but the basic idea is that a character's history shapes how they see the world, what they want, how they behave, and the boundaries they draw for themselves. Your mentor should have all that too. So once you have that character built, ask yourself, what can this student challenge in the mentor? And between these first two traps we've talked about, you can start to see how this relationship starts becoming uniquely yours. We've given these two an actual story together, and now what happens between them can affect where both characters go. But we are not done yet, because in the next trap, we are getting into two of my favorite mentor characters of all time. So don't go anywhere. Well, all right, plot heads, before we keep going, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have been here for this chapter of When Characters Collide, and for all the new ones that have joined us. This has been such a fun chapter of plot luck to make, and we're getting pretty close to winding it down. But we are about to head into some uncharted territory, starting with one of the things writers struggle with more than anything else, dialogue. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. All right, back to it. Now here's the dangerous thing about mentor characters. They have the answers. That is literally why we put them in the story, right? The protagonist can't do something and this person can. They know what the student is doing wrong, what they need to work on, probably even things that they don't want to hear, which is incredibly useful for the protagonist, but it can also be terrible for the drama. Because once the mentor has the answer, it is really easy to start building every training scene around getting the student caught up. Here is the problem, here is the exercise, struggle with it, and then you have your breakthrough. And before long, it's going to start feeling like a syllabus. So how do we break that? Well, I think I have an answer. The student doesn't have to learn on the mentor's schedule. And that gap between what is taught and what gets learned is where I think a lot of drama is hiding in this relationship. And for this example, I could not possibly make a video about mentors without talking about the GOAT, the Dragon of the West, Uncle Iroh. I mean, Iroh might be the most patient teacher in all of fiction. After 2 seasons of tea and wisdom, Zuko doesn't learn his lesson. Iroh spends most of Avatar trying to get Zuko to stop measuring his honor by if his father accepts him. He can challenge it, he can model something entirely different for Zuko, and that still doesn't mean it's going to get through his thick skull. And eventually, the story gives him the perfect mentor moment. He gets put in a dilemma.
It's time for you to look inward.
And he chooses the path his sister Azula picks for him, which I think is such an important failure for this trap because Iroh has given him every lesson he needs, but Zuko has not internalized it yet. And Avatar doesn't fix that by just giving him another training session. He finally gets to live inside this life that he's been chasing, and that experience makes it quite clear what Iroh had been telling him all along.
I was afraid you lost your way.
So by the time he comes back to his uncle, the teaching and the learning have happened in completely different places. That is what this trope trap of these lesson plans can accidentally take away from us. If every lesson immediately becomes the next piece of progress, the rest of the story never gets a chance to teach the student anything. And to take this point home, let's talk about Treasure Planet, which does something even messier, which really is just an excuse to talk about one of my favorite animated movies of all time. Seriously, Treasure Planet does not get nearly enough love. So Jim is basically this kid without a father figure who's basically stopped believing he's going to amount to much. And then he gets stuck working under John Silver on this voyage to the Treasure Planet. And Silver really takes to him, teaching him how to work the ship, pushing him and trusting him with more responsibility, and eventually tells him that amazing line,
You got the makings of greatness in you, but you gotta take the helm and chart your own course.
I mean, that sounds like the perfect mentor character, ready to become that father figure who can help Jim grow into the person everyone else has stopped expecting him to be. But that doesn't last long because Silver is actually the pirate leading a mutiny to take the treasure for himself. So there goes our nice, clean mentor-student progression, but something much more interesting takes its place. The betrayal sets off its own part of Jim's development. And that is where I think Silver and Iroh make a really interesting pair for this particular trap. With Zuko, the student fails the lesson. With Jim, the mentor fails the student. In both cases, the lesson going wrong is what creates the next piece of the story. So when you take this back to your own story, I want you to answer these 2 questions. What is the mentor trying to teach the student? And 2, what actually has to happen for this particular student to learn it? And if those answers keep leading you back to the same old lesson plan, think a little deeper. Think where one of these 2 characters can fail the other. Well, all right, plot heads, you've almost done it. You've almost built a mentor character that feels uniquely yours without falling into the same old cliches that the audience will pick up right away. But we just have one more trap to avoid, and it might be the most well-known of all of them. 3 trope traps down, and our mentor is somehow still alive. Because we all know how this usually goes, right? The mentor must die. Ugh. You know, I have a big problem when something is absolute like that, because stories do not have to abide by rules, because you just have to understand them to break them. There is no one right way to write a story, to write a mentor character. I mean, there's actually a name for this trope called the mentor occupational hazard, which sounds like something you should probably disclose before somebody takes a job. I mean, Obi-Wan, Dumbledore, Mufasa, Qui-Gon, I mean, pick your poison, because fiction absolutely loves killing the mentor. And I get why we do it, because eventually this relationship hands your story 2 problems. If the mentor still knows more, fights better, has years of experience on the protagonist, well, why aren't they the ones dealing with the problem? And 2, even if you find some excuse to keep them out of it, how is your student ever supposed to prove they can stand on their own while their safety net is standing right there? So death is the thing a lot of writers resort to. But I don't think killing the mentor itself is a trap. I think actually that the trap itself starts way earlier. When we build this character like mentoring was always going to be the last thing they ever did. Because think about how much of a mentor points backwards. I mean, they've already fought their battles, they already made those mistakes, they already learned their lessons, and now all that's left for them is just to pass it on. But I think what we should be asking is, what is left in their character arc? What more can they still become? And there might not be a mentor in fiction who looks more doomed than All Might. I mean, this man was basically gift wrapped in a death flag. His body is already wrecked, he picks Deku as a successor, he loses One for All, he burns through the last of his flame, and he retires. And then you have Sir Night-Eye reveal that he has literally seen All Might die a gruesome death at the hands of a villain. All right, we get it, he's probably going to die. But I think My Hero Academia does something much better than keeping him alive to surprise us. It makes being alive the problem, because Deku eventually starts doing exactly what a student in this trope is supposed to do. In the Dark Hero arc, he gets strong enough to go out on his own and starts pushing everybody away to keep them out of his blast radius. All Might included. Man, that still breaks my heart when he rejects All Might out in the rain. And All Might eventually gets to the point of wondering, what does he have left anymore to give? And by every definition of this trope, he is at the end of the line, which to me is a far more interesting story than just a funeral. What does the world's greatest hero do when he can no longer perform the role of the world's greatest hero? And this absolute madman answers it by building himself an armored suit and going after All for One. And the series walks that trope right up to the edge. All for One beats him down and lifts his broken body into the air, exactly like the Vision, and it looks like Night-Eye. And the trope itself was right all along, except Deku and Bakugo get there first. And I mean, All Might even imagines Night-Eye and says the quiet part out loud. Isn't the old master supposed to pass on everything he knows and then die? And I think that's an important lesson, to be intentional with how you treat the death or removal of your mentor characters. So when you take this back to your own story, I really want you to evaluate these two questions. One, what has to happen for this student to truly stand up on their own? And two, if mentoring them ended tomorrow, what would your mentor still be trying to do? I mean, maybe death is really where these two answers meet. But don't make the funeral your answer to the first question before you've answered the second. Let the student outgrow the mentor and then decide what happens next. Well, all right, plotheads, we did it. I think it's time for us to wind this down. So let's go back to our first question. Can you write an original mentor? And I think after all this, it might be the wrong question to chase, because tropes exist for a reason. Somebody found something true about how people work, and it works so well that we keep using them. But at the same time, they can start to feel like a cage. Like the shape of your story got decided before you ever sat down to write it. So I would say, stop chasing original and start chasing specific. That's what every one of these traps is really protecting, because each one of those traps is an opportunity for you to take back creative control of your story and to write it freshly and originally and uniquely yours. And once again, I'm Brian, this is Plot Luck. And if you've ever loved a story, felt let down by one, or dreamed of telling your own, pull up a chair, hit subscribe, and let's stir the plot together. That's a wrap.